You're listening to a Rock Candy podcast.
No matter where you are, no matter if we're long, they follow our pod. Oh, mail your voicemail succeed. May make all the friends you need. May find passion in the Discord chat room. When you feel bonkers, things are grim, give 45 episodes to spin. May find comfort in knowing we love you. I can't keep silent in my own house, and I need to be honest. I can't believe you would fall this far down. Is the parody gone?
Coming to you from Magnified Studios, Magnified Pod presents It's Hard to Find a Podcast. Covering You know what? John, we're covering Craig's brother today because we're talking to Ted Bond.
That's right.
There's no normal intro because this is not a normal episode.
Yeah.
We're going back season 3. We're talking Craig's brother with our boy Ted Bond, lead singer of Craig's brother. They got a new album out. Easily won, rarely deserved. That was Violent Faith, one of the singles off the new record that everybody should be listening to right now. What a good conversation.
Yeah, man. What a delight.
What a good
About a year ago, we had a month of Craig's brother content on the pod. They were some of my favorite episodes that we did during season 3 because there's just so much to chew on in terms of Ted's thoughtfulness and the band's thoughtfulness. Those albums rip. Like I said, that was my big sort of discovery. Somehow they were not on my radar growing up, and I really fell in love with them during the season. So I would recommend folks go back and listen to those if you haven't. If you want to revisit them, they're a lot of fun. But Ted called in with some voicemails about a year ago, and we were like, we need to get this dude on. We'll get him on when the new record comes out. And at that point, it was like, well, looks like it's coming out soon. And then, more COVID, and he had a wildfire that affected their house, and there were these delays. But anyway, the record is out now, so we wanted to talk to him, and I'm so glad we got to. It's a really fun conversation.
Yes. We could have talked to him for longer. But time differences, kids.
Yep.
All that. But John, what do you say we just jump right into that conversation?
Let's do it.
John, today on Magnified Pod, we welcome Ted Bond. He is the lead singer of Craig's Brother, a band that we went deep into last season. Craig's Brother has just released a brand new record, Easily Won, Rarely Deserved. You can get it right now at peopleofpunkrockrecords.com on vinyl, CD, cassette, what have you. We're so happy to have him. Ted, welcome to Magnified Pod.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure and an honor.
I feel like our relationship maybe got off to a little bit of a rockier start than maybe I would have, than teenage me would have hoped. But I do feel like maybe that, if we're going to use a sea metaphor, maybe the bad feelings have sailed onwards, or they've become lost at sea of sorts.
The bad feelings are somewhere adrift in the Pacific.
Exactly.
This is the problem with our show is we go in depth on bands that meant a lot to us growing up, and then they reach out to us and they're like, hey, fuck you guys. But no, we know you are a thoughtful dude and a funny dude, and we knew you were into sort of our approach to the whole thing. So truly one of the thrills of last season was getting those several voicemails in a row from you, and we were like, we got to talk to this guy. So very happy to have you on.
I think I had, was a few drinks in when I told you what I thought about your guys' review of Lost at Sea. Don't take it too seriously. I don't really hate you guys.
We understand.
Yeah,
And in our defense, I mean, I would like to actually talk about this at some point, but like we said, we enjoyed the songs in Lost at Sea. It was the production approach that we took some issue with. So I was wondering like about your thoughts on the production of that record, but
it could seriously use a remastering, that's for sure. Like, the mastering was not good. We kind of went nuts in some ways on the production.
Over the course of the podcast, we've talked to a number of bands. You know, Joel from Goaty Hook, one of them. They looking back on certain records that they're just like they didn't have the time, they didn't have the money, they didn't have. There's just often so many constraints when it comes to what the production is going to be, or the mixing or the mastering or whatever. It's, you can only work with what you have at the time, I suppose. But
well, and in those days, the record label was paying for it and making decisions as to who was doing it. We didn't really have a choice. It was just like, show up here, here's your producer, get it done in 2 weeks.
Yep, that's all what we figured. And yeah, I mean, most listeners weighed in and were like, that's, either their number one or number two album of yours, and we're like, what's wrong with you guys? So anyway, it could just be our problem. But yeah, for sure, one of the highlights of last season was going through the Craig's Brother discography, and just there was so much to chew on in terms of the thoughtfulness that you always have approached your lyrics and your songwriting with, and just had so much fun going through all of the records. So we're particularly pumped to have you on as we're diving into the new record in the coming weeks, and just revisiting some of what we talked about last year with the Craig's Brother discography. But just to kind of get further back to sort of your origins in the scene, and how you kind of came into this world of the Christian punk scene that we talk about every week. Like you always brought a level of complexity and thoughtfulness to Craig's Brother that kind of made you guys stand out within the scene, and the calling out of Christian hypocrisy and wrestling with beliefs. I mean, that's stuff that you guys did from the first song on your first album, and those things today are worse than ever. So I mean, what was it that was the questioning of sort of the church or certain kinds of theology just there from the beginning with you, or what was it that allowed you to sort of have that be the motivating force for your approach to some of your songwriting?
I definitely went through a phase where I was like, kind of like, wasn't really questioning Christianity or questioning my faith much. I'm trying to remember what exactly like motivated Insult to Injury in particular. Definitely by the time I got into Craig's Brother, I was thinking kind of a little bit deeper about it. So I was pretty into the Bible and theology, like starting like in middle school. I think I had read the whole Bible by freshman year of high school. I started meeting with the pastor of my church, like one-on-one, and we started going through Calvin's Institutes. What happened was he was discipling me, quote unquote, which meant like I was supposed to tell him about the naughty things I was doing as a teenager, and he was going to help me be a less naughty teenager or something.
Yikes. And
so I had a girlfriend and we were fooling around, obviously. Okay, it's a complicated story. The church hired this assistant pastor. And after a little while, there was this group in the church that decided that they liked the assistant pastor better. They wanted him to be the head pastor, and they wanted the head pastor to go away. And so there's all this backroom kind of negotiating drama going on. And the head pastor, my buddy, so the assistant pastor, his daughter had gotten pregnant, and she was still in high school. And so he was like, well, if you guys are going to try to do this, then I have to bring up like 1 Timothy or something where it says that an elder's family should be like, whatever, good people or something. He's like, and then if that's the case, so my girlfriend's dad was also one of the elders. And he's like, if that's the case, then I also have to bring it up about your daughter messing around with Ted Bond. And of course, he didn't know. Like, it's not like she was telling her dad.
Right.
Granted, as a father of a teenager, he probably should have known. But nevertheless, the guy brings us up in a meeting, by the time it got back to me, I felt pretty thrown under the bus and was kind of like pretty disappointed, I guess. And we'll say that's what inspired Insult to Injury.
Was that something that you intentionally wanted to bring to the band, or is that just naturally what came out for you guys? Were you like, we want to keep it authentic, including, wrestling with some of the stuff, or was that just kind of like what naturally came to be?
That was just normal for us. Like so when we first got together, we were pretty serious about our faith, and we were praying together and like sharing all our struggles with each other. And like, I think it was like the first group of friends that I ever had where we were just like out of the closet. Yeah, I jerk off all the time. Like, I don't know, just being really honest and open was kind of just part of the relationship. That's like, so like the song Going Blind.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of came out of that, right? Like,
yeah,
we kind of just assumed that because we were Christians and we had a band that we were like a Christian band. But really, I think more it was like after writing a few songs, we're like, oh, well, this isn't really what most Christian musicians are doing. They're not like being like, hey, I jack off.
But it's so much more relatable to the kids who are obviously doing the same stuff, and rather than feeling shame listening to Christian bands, they feel like, oh, these guys are actually not bullshitting us. I feel like that's really important to kids in the scene.
There's also a whole lot more nuanced.
Yeah,
the songs never really felt like, they never felt preachy. It felt more like you were talking about your own struggles and yourself, rather than saying like, this is what you need to do and this is what you need to believe. And even with Going Blind, like even as a kid, as a teenager, as growing up as a Christian, also furiously jerking off all the time, I still felt bad about it. And that sort of stuff that you're talking about with that pastor, kind of like, it's such a bummer to me, giving young kids this sort of complex about the normal stuff that they are doing with exploring their sexuality is just like inherently wrong or inherently sinful. And then using that as like some sort of, leverage to oust somebody or like make somebody, it's all just gross.
It's totally gross. Yeah, it's so gross. Like looking back, I'm like, what a creepy. And I can remember the look on his face, and like an older me would have just been like, ew, I'm not talking to you about my relationship. Like, no way, you're disgusting. Like he had this like kind of perverted kind of like, give me the juicy details, I'm an old pervert. Look on his face. Like,
yeah, I can't imagine like at all at this age wanting to sit down with a teenager and have them like that just sounds
like, confess your sins to me. Like people need, I think it's confessing your sins or having someone that you could talk to about your struggles is a good thing, but yeah, that's so weird and creepy. I think there's a strong sense of abuse of power that when it comes to age differences and that we have now that wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
The nuance, like you're saying, Andrew, I think is one of the things that really struck us listening back, to the early records in particular, is standing out in that time. Cause like you're talking about Going Blind, like we were saying, the season that we did on Skate Punk was so driven by so many songs by teenage boys at the time who were like writing about lust maybe, or writing about abortion or whatever. But like rarely did the women subjects of these songs feel like their personhood was being grappled with. And so in Going Blind, it's like a young man considering like, oh, there's a person behind this image that I'm looking at. And like that feels like a pretty nuanced, interesting take within the scene, to be like wrestling with that aspect of lust, of like dehumanizing someone.
Totally. And that's actually I think the only thing about it, like, I still masturbate, but I don't feel bad about it anymore, other than unless there's some sort of kind of dehumanizing of somebody going on.
Right.
I
think, it just was just from the beginning. It was always very clear that like there was you know, I know it's a much later song, but like when we talked about the problem of evil with Andrew's dad, Jay, bringing that theology in.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
He,
That was super cool.
yeah. He's done a few other Jay's Theology Corners with us, getting into the theology, some of these punk rock songs. But we were kind of saying, like, if you are a quote unquote Christian band, if you're making music about your relationship to God, to like not wrestle with the idea of the problem of evil is almost like irresponsible. I feel like it's such a core part of the sort of like faith experience. And to have just questions like that always be a part of sort of the Craig's Brother identity, I think it meant a lot to us. And I know it's meant a lot to a lot of people. Just dealing with the full picture of what it means to wrestle with faith. So,
well, how can you believe in a good God? I mean, I'm just expressing the problem of evil, but how can you believe in a good God with all this shit going on?
Right.
And that should be, I mean, if you're not wrestling with that, that's a problem. I mean, even Jesus, right? On the cross, he's like,
Right.
my God.
Yeah.
Why have you forsaken me? Even Jesus is wrestling with the problem of evil.
Yep.
Yeah. Kind of going back to what John was talking about with these teenage boys writing songs for these punk bands that we've listened to growing up. And of course, you know, it's give them a little grace. You know, they're writing about what they knew, and in a lot of cases, writing about the stuff that they were taught to believe, and that they were just sort of saying, like, they're going to youth group and like, this is what you believe. And they say, you know, okay. And, you know, as many kids did, like I did, I wasn't as questioning as I should have been in my younger days. But so much of the songs were like what we colloquially call the I'm a piece of shit song. And they just focus so much on like how awful I am. I'm a huge sinner. I don't deserve God's love. I'm a piece of shit. Look at all these terrible things I do. I don't deserve. And it's just like, you're doing okay. It's okay. And
I'm laughing right now because I don't know if Adam will appreciate this, but Adam and I, his band in high school, their first name was Yellow Snow.
Okay.
nice.
And they had a song that was like, I don't know why we make yellow snow. And it was like, it was about sin, obviously. Or maybe that's not obvious, but that's what it was about. And then they changed their name to the Defects. And they had a song that went, better take me back, I'm defected. But both kind of the same theme. But yeah.
That rules. Release the defective tapes.
The Defects demo.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Punk rock.
Yeah, put it out, Adam.
What are you hiding, Adam? Why are you keeping this from us?
It was just, I'm saying the same thing over and over, but it was just really refreshing to, it's not a coincidence that like almost every band from that time and that scene had an abortion song. Like you're saying, Andrew, it was like, that was what was expected of Christian bands. These are the important topics. And so the fact that Craig's Brother and you, I think in particular with the songs that you brought to the band, like always was much more expansive than that, was just, I don't know, something that was more meaningful than what was out there. So I don't know, to kind of get back to what you were saying from the beginning about like your own faith, like, could you talk a little bit about the church or the faith tradition that you grew up in, and like why you think you felt the freedom to not exist only within its confines? Because like, I think a lot of people wouldn't have felt like they were able to have the freedom to express some of the things you did. Like, what do you sort of attribute that to about your own upbringing?
Okay, I think the reason I found or got into this youth group and this church that I was going to in high school was because they were pretty accepting of me for who I was. And I wasn't like 100% youth group kid. Like I had a band in high school, General Handiwork, and I was the only Christian in the band, and there was nothing Christian about the band. Like we were as offensive as we could be, and we were a punk band and doing crazy stuff. Our bass player would wear a dress, and we're throwing things at the audience and just trying to be as outlandish as we could. And most of the people that I hung out with, in fact, that was when I first came to the youth group, I was like, yeah, I'm a Christian, but I don't have any Christian friends. I'm like, was like kind of my prayer, was that I would find a group of Christian friends. But it never really happened until Craig's brother. And then by the time it happened, I was kind of done with that church and that youth group.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was kind of like, I had one foot in like two different worlds, I guess. And in the world of my secular friends, like lyrics were huge. Like one of our favorite artists was Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I mean, that's some good lyrics. Like you just read his lyrics without the music and get a lot out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So lyrics were super important, and like stupid, cheesy lyrics were like the sort of thing that like, yeah, maybe the Christians would have been stoked, but my non-Christian friends would have made fun of me for, which they did anyway, that because I was in a quote unquote Christian band. But so that, I think that's part of it, that there was kind of my own understanding of what was expected of me was that like I couldn't just write Christian propaganda.
Right.
By the time we formed, this punk rock scene was really blossoming in Santa Cruz, like Good Riddance and Fury 66. I was going to wear my Fury 66 shirt. So what brought us together was an interest in these bands that we were seeing live like every weekend. It wasn't like we got together at the youth group to form a Christian punk band so we could play when MXPX came to town. We were like, maybe we could open for Propaganda or something.
Right.
I mean, I think that's a large part of it, right? The kids who are writing those like Christian propaganda songs, I'm pretty sure most of them were, pretty steeped in their youth group, and probably like the youth pastor was saying like, well, you guys should write a song about abortion or something like.
Right. For sure.
And they, they weren't really thinking about anybody outside the youth group, whereas we definitely were. And if anything, I feel like Christian music or the Christian music scene was convenient. Like we came along and we're like, oh, we're a Christian punk band. And suddenly like all these youth groups and stuff wanted to book us. And it was really easy to get gigs. And point is, I guess I had my feet in two different worlds. I guess going back to that, and that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah. I mean, not a lot of teenage boys sitting around in the 90s, just casually having conversations about abortion and reproductive rights.
Dude, I'm so glad that we didn't, because I was pretty pro-life back then.
Oh man, I mean, that was the first time I had exposure to it was at Cornerstone, because they had the Rock for Life people there, and that was the first time I bought into that propaganda hook, line, and sinker. I was the perfect candidate for that. They were appealing to my emotions, and they're like, abortion could have killed your best friend. You might not know your best friend because they were a victim of abortion. And this was like, and like, I was emo as hell. I'm still emo as hell. And, and that sort of thing. It's like, it's fucked up.
You're like, no, well, I'm a middle-class kid in the suburbs. And if that kid wasn't aborted, they would not be in the suburbs.
Right.
But that's a whole nother story. I don't know if you were a middle-class kid in the suburbs. I'm just making an assumption about
you're correct.
I mean, to be fair, I'm not pro-life anymore, but like that one to me is a pretty ethically complex issue. I understand the pro-life arguments. I don't agree with them at all, but if you believe that baby in the womb is an actual human and has all the rights of a human, I mean, and then there's the whole argument of when does somebody actually become a human who has rights?
Right.
Like, I think it's Peter Singer, the ethicist, who argues that babies don't even have a right to life after they're born, which I don't agree with that either, but it's interesting.
Right.
That somebody's arguing that. And back in those days, the pro-life argument seemed pretty convincing to me. I wasn't even necessarily questioning that. Maybe Lonely Girl was our abortion song.
That's the closest you got, but even that had a level of sort of respect that other like more explicitly abortion songs didn't have.
So the story behind that is my mom got pregnant out of wedlock. My dad and her were just fooling around. It wasn't a really very serious relationship, and he wanted her to have an abortion, and she chose not to. And for her, like that was like her like pro-life moment, and she's been pro-life ever since. She still is pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to say to her now, that I'm older and have a more nuanced perspective of it is, you know, Mom, I want to believe that you chose to have me. Not that you did it because it was the right thing to do, but you did it because you loved me and wanted me, which I think is true. I think she did want me. Like, if it was illegal, I would never know that. Like, the fact that she had a choice means that I know that she wanted me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think us talking through that song and even the nuance within it, you know, we were talking about how different the sort of story that's painted there is from a lot of the songs we'd heard up to that point. And, you know, regardless of where you sort of fall along anti-choice or pro-choice like stance, like I feel like the problematic elements of like the way that these Christian bands would talk about it was usually, again, dehumanizing and making up straw men characters and assuming the worst in its sort of female protagonists, and like
right, or the girl who got pregnant out of wedlock, like her life was just ruined.
Right.
Like, poor her, like she made a bad decision and now look what happened to her. Whereas in Lonely Girl, it's a wonderful thing that happened to my mom.
Right.
Even though it wasn't necessarily the way she wanted it.
Yeah. That there was a level of complexity to it, and complexity wasn't encouraged. Like we said, Rock for Life was like, abortion is mean. And it's like, okay, again, regardless of where you fall on this, like, that's an incredibly narrowing, almost like
reductive.
Yeah, reductive and like patronizing to the complexity of the issue. Like, so yeah, anytime there were sort of attempts to poke at the party line of like, this is black and white, by saying that, you know, maybe some things are more gray than you think, I think always stood out. But yeah, I can really relate to being both very into in-depth Bible study and theology, and also like deeply into secular punk and music scene just in general. Because I mean, obviously this is something we've talked a lot about on the pod, but I grew up Episcopalian, so like I was sort of on the line of that stuff. But the youth group was very evangelical, and that's where I found out about MXPX and you know, everything. So I kind of like I was already like going to punk shows that were like not a part of the Christian scene before I found out about the Christian world. And I think towing that line of like the sort of evangelical Bible study we were doing in youth group, but also like continuing to go to First Ave on weekends and see, you know, bands that were like very open about being anti-religious, were like, I don't know, I was holding those things in tension a lot growing up. And I feel like I heard you talk about that to some extent on our buddy Brian, the Rudy Librarians pod, of sort of like existing in both those worlds. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to sort of that idea of having a foot in each of those scenes, and sort of like how that, I don't know, motivated your approach to like engaging in church or engaging in the punk scene or whatever.
You know what I just remembered? I was like taking acid Sunday night and then going to church, or I mean Saturday night and then going to church Sunday morning. Like maybe that's where the like more nuanced, introspective lyrics come from.
Sounds right.
Yeah, no, it's weird. Like, the thing is, teenagers can totally like be completely different people in different scenes. Like, I think it has something to do with like the development of the brain, like, and not even really question. Like, I did question it. I did kind of sometimes be like, oh, the people at church knew what I was doing last night. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to figure out your identity. That's kind of the main goal in life at that age, right? What happened is, instead of like being a hypocrite or a liar, my developing brain was like, well, there's got to be some sort of resolution to this. I don't believe that like my secular friends are like just evil and that's all there is to say about it. And I don't believe that, you know, whatever they're saying at church is just right, and that's all there is to say about it. You know what else? Maybe this is part of it too. Like, the church I was going to was very reformed. We were critical of other Christians, like, that weren't reformed enough. They had bad theology or whatever.
Sure.
The bad theology, like, I guess that got me thinking about criticizing it. I remember I read this book. I think this was before I was even in Craig's Brother. It was like Fit Body, Fat Minds or something like that. But this writer, I can't even remember who it was arguing that Christians are called to be in the world, but not of the world. and what we had become was of the world but not in the world. And that kind of like, that was the beginning of my questioning of Christian music. And definitely, you know what, going back even further, right? Freshman year, I get involved in this youth group, and the youth leader starts pressuring me to only listen to Christian music. And I started having this argument with him. I'm like, yeah, but it's not as good. He's like, no, it's totally good. Like, check out this band. And I'd be like, nope, not as good. and his attempts to argue were so lame. Like, he wasn't making any headway with me. Like no way. And I'm definitely not giving up the Beatles. Like I was willing to listen to some Christian groups. I kind of like some Michael W. Smith stuff. I still kind of do, honestly. I have to admit. Pete, Pray for Rain, I thought was pretty great.
Oh man, we're doing a pod for Rain coming up.
Nice.
I just saw them a few weeks ago.
No way. Were they good?
Man. Oh, dude. Oh
yeah.
Well, I'll share some video with you. Unbelievable.
And then when I discovered the Crucified,
yeah, that
was like the first quote unquote Christian like hardcore band that I was like, this is cool. This is actually good. So that kind of, but in general, yeah, I was questioning the whole thing. My youth group pastor was trying to convince me that it was all about Christian music. I didn't believe it. Then I finally found this book, Fit Bodies, Fat Minds. I think that's what it was called. Might be a different book.
It is. I Googled it.
It's a different book?
No, that's what it's called. Yeah.
Oh, that's the same book. Okay. And that was like, see, you're wrong. And then I don't know. So I kind of, I guess my whole high school experience was like training me to be critical of what I was hearing at church.
You know, we've talked about this a lot too, but I think what stood out for me and Andrew growing up was those bands that were solidly in the Christian scene, but questioning both of those worlds that they had, you know, a foot in, of like having the sort of punk rock ethos of that scene, but questioning aspects of that, and then having that ethos inform your role in the church of questioning you know, the church they're part of in that scene. That sort of questioning always seemed like very Christian to me.
Yeah.
And so I always appreciated that. But, you know, like we're saying, that was towing the party line seemed to be much more the norm for Christian bands. So I think sadly, that sort of questioning just didn't happen a lot, at least within the confines of, like you're saying, like quote unquote Christian music.
What gets me is there was this like kind of story that was told that like what goes on in the secular world is like really unsafe, and like you might get exposed to drugs and sex and, you know, people who aren't straight.
Sign me up.
But actually the punk music scene is so much safer.
Yeah.
So much less likely to get thrown under the bus. You don't have this sort of like, you know, in the youth group where the person's like, well, I just want to pray for my friend Sarah because she's struggling sexually. Like, what? Like, fuck you. Like, what? How is that right at all? In punk rock, it's like you're pretty much accepted for whoever you are. You can be as weird and as lame as you want. And you're not going to get thrown under the bus for something stupid. I mean, I can't imagine anybody getting thrown under the bus anyway. I feel like it was, I don't know. I don't know what was unsafe about it, honestly. Like the punk rock feels so much safer to me than what I was experiencing at church.
Well, yeah. Once if kids started going out to punk, the non-Christian, the secular punk shows, and realized, oh, this is actually fine, and it's not terrible, and I'm not going to, you know, die, then and realize that like, oh, these people are accepting of me, and they're not like this group of like evil people trying to like do satanic things to me. And it's like, oh, well, then they realize that their youth pastor's been lying to them the whole time, and you know, the whole facade just kind of falls apart.
Yeah.
That thing about like seeing Jesus-like behavior more on display in the punk scene, in the DIY scene, and how they treated each other than what I was seeing at church. You know, that will strike you. Yeah, I was thinking about that. There was like that viral video of that woman who was talking about like a community that was protesting like what was it, like a drag brunch or a drag event or something like that, and how they didn't want it to happen because it was like going to encourage abuse of kids or whatever. And she's like, I've never been abused at a drag brunch, but I've been abused in church. And so just like pointing out this supposed terrible behavior that you're shielding people from in the secular world is usually going on in the church more than it is in the other scene. So anyway, just
lots of projection.
Yes. And again, I feel like that was like the fact that you guys were like this blistering fast punk as hell band that was sticking true to what you found to be like a holistic and like, you know, vibrant faith, that like those two things together, that always like stands out, where you feel like these two things do exist together, and they make me feel less alone, because I'm finding you know, myself in people who can see sort of both of those worlds. But you know, to get to like fast forward a bit to sort of your own faith and how that informs you, like I know you've made reference to going to seminary and preaching regularly now, so like can you tell us a little bit about that? What is your sort of role in the church these days, or your theology, your approach to living that out?
I have a master's in theology from Fuller Seminary, and I'm the primary preacher at my church. I didn't intend on becoming a preacher. Like, actually, that was my intention in high school. But after that fallout with that pastor that I told you about, I was like, screw this. I'm just going to play music. And I kind of thought at that point that I might actually have a career playing music. But that didn't work out. And then later in life, I found myself looking for a job. And there was a job as a director of education / like youth pastor guy at the Methodist church here in Boulder Creek. And the Methodist church, at least in California, is pretty open-minded, and there wasn't really anything in their belief system that was egregious to me. So I was like, okay, I could do this. I could teach the Bible here at this church. And then one thing led to another. The primary preacher ended up being moved somewhere else, and they needed a preacher, and I ended up being the most qualified person to do it. And now here I am doing it. And actually, I think that's probably going to be like my career for the rest of my life, which is, I don't know. It's not because I'm like a great Christian or anything. It just is, I get more because I'm like equipped. I know the Bible, I can teach it and explain it. So that's how I wound up there. Is that answering the question?
Yeah. Are your sermons made available? Is that something that people can listen to?
Yeah. If you go on our church Facebook page, what we need to do is edit just the sermon, because what we have are videos of the whole service.
Sure.
What you see when I'm not preaching, I make no promises about. But
sure. Well, I'd be
we've had some incredible musicians though. Actually, we got this guy. He needed a place to store his harpsichord.
Okay.
We're like, okay, well, we got a place for you. So we have a harpsichord, which means we're playing a lot of Bach and classical music. But I like that. I don't know. I prefer that to like Christian contemporary.
Right.
Shit.
I would love to hear some of Ted Bond preaching, because I imagine the approach that you take to lyrics and the thoughtfulness that we're talking about and the wrestling with faith and the nuance of it, like I imagine that's how you approach preaching as well.
My preaching is definitely very honest. I definitely am open about whatever questions I have. I'm not towing any sort of theological line. I mean, it seems to work. People are relating to it. I can't say I work as hard on my sermons as I do on Craig's Brother lyrics.
Sure.
At least not yet. So I don't know. Maybe I should find some good examples. I feel like if you just pick a random Sunday, it might not be that good.
Sure. Well, yeah, maybe you can like send us something you're proud of or something, because I would love to hear it.
I don't know if you saw my interview with Billy Power or heard my interview with Billy Power.
Yeah. That was like a while ago, right? When was this?
Yeah, that was like,
okay.
I don't know. I sent him the sermon that I preached right after the January 6th insurrection.
Okay.
And like, basically I started off by saying like, I felt like I wanted to punch someone in the face. That was a pretty good one.
Cool. That sounds good.
after this record, I knew
Devil's in the details, by the way.
Devil's in the Details. Sorry, yeah. For
It's an audio medium.
Audio medium.
Right,
I've been doing this for over 4 years and I forget sometimes. After Devil's in the Details came out, and then when we heard that there's new Craig's Brother record in the works, I'm like, oh man, we know our boy Ted is going to go off on the church and more politics and stuff and on this new record. And I do kind of want to get into a little bit of the new record if you're open to that.
Totally. There
had been some time between the last full length and then Devil's in the Details. What prompted the writing of new Craig's Brother material? And then when did you decide that it was time for another full length?
Devil's in the Details, I think that was just kind of a random idea. We're like, what if we crowdfunded a little EP? And then it worked, which made us like think, well, okay, then we could probably do more than that. But then the other thing is, I had been saying, I don't know if you're aware of Paul Stevenson and the band Double Negative.
Mm-mm.
It's a English band. Paul's from Manchester, and Paul, he's just brilliant songwriter, brilliant musician. Never really leaves his room / recording studio, and he just records like incredible songs, like over and over and over again, every part. And I've known him for a while. I've collaborated with him a number of times, and I kept saying, like, just randomly, like, you know what, like next record, I'm just going to have Paul record everything, and I'm just going to do the vocals. And then at one point, Steven was like, I could do that too. And then like, I was like, oh yeah, you totally could. And then we were like, okay, well, let's just do it. Basically, he and I just decided we were gonna, and our goal was to get 20 songs done. And we met up at the church that I work at, and we pre-produced the record like in a couple hours and just went from there. But I don't know, it's hard. Why? Like, it wasn't like why did we wait so long? I don't know.
There was a little bit of a lineup change on this. There's no Juice, no Scott. And you just decided, like, in terms of availability, that you guys just wanted to hammer it out? Or
yeah. So Juice had a series of really heavy things going on in his life. His wife died.
Oof.
He just wasn't really available.
Sure.
And Scott had just kind of moved on. Like, how he's not in the video for Follow Your Heart.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he would necessarily agree, but the way I see it is he moved on. It was hard to get him to, want to commit to anything really. Like, even getting him to finish the bass on Devil's in the Details was hard. And so part of the, I guess, motivation for this record was Steven and I were like, we don't have to deal with 3 other guys. We don't have to teach them all the parts. I guess in the past, I'd let that stop me. I was like, oh, well, I don't have a band, so how can I make a record? But then we kind of realized that we could. And now that the technology is cheaper and I could set up a home studio and stuff, there really wasn't any reason not to.
Congrats on doing that, because it sounds great.
It does, really does.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. What was your approach to the production and the songwriting this time around? Like, how different was that? Just doing it, you and Steven, how did you decide you wanted to make this record? Like, was there a particular approach that you guys wanted to take here, or was it just kind of what came out? We
each had songs that we brought to the table. A lot of my songs are songs that are really old. Like, I started writing some of them like, back in the Homecoming days even.
Oh wow.
Like the song Judgment Day. Actually, I wrote that right after Andy and Adam quit.
Interesting.
But I never finished it until like last year. So that we had like a bunch of material that we already kind of had. We got together and we're just like, kind of sorted through the material and found the ones that we wanted. We made up our minds to not take it too seriously. I think in the past, Craig's Brother took everything too seriously, which maybe kind of shows in our music, like in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I feel like it was a good decision to not take things too seriously this time. Like, at this point, it's our 4th record, 4th full length. We're not cutting our teeth anymore. We've been around the block. We know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of took this approach of like, let's just do it, get it done. Don't overthink it, and just make it happen and decide whether it's good after it's done, which seemed to work out pretty well.
It's good. So
yeah. Yes. And That's interesting that you have some songs that you're pulling from the past. Some clearly to me strike me as very much in the present, like Out of Your Hole and Violent Faith.
Totally.
Just talking about from what I can tell, evangelicalism and the church and what has the festering sin of racism just showing its ugly face to the world.
Totally.
Because there's a lyric on Violent Faith that I was curious about that said, "Now that the door is open, I'll never place my hope in you. I'm leaving you forever and ever." And I'm wondering what the "you" is in that.
This lyric's probably going to haunt me. So I'm really kind of thinking about the people that I grew up with who were really convinced that they were totally right and they were out to like save everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing finger quotes for you people in podcast land. And the reality is they were terrified of everybody who was different than them, which is basically the basis of racism.
Right.
They weren't these righteous saviors. They were actually people in need of salvation more than the people that they were trying to save. The whole leaving you forever, like that kind of just worked as a line there. Like, it's not like I'm not really leaving anybody forever, but I'm leaving that way of thinking forever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Since I grew up in that, and I remember, thinking that too, like, oh, we got to save all these people. At some point realizing like, maybe first I should worry about whether or not I'm saved. And I don't mean saved in like there came a point in my first marriage, things were going so wrong in my life, mostly because of my own like bad decisions and personality, fighting with my wife, drinking too much, all of that sort of stuff, that I realized like, okay, I'm quote unquote saved, but what does that mean? Like, whatever, and what good is it if I'm like in hell right now?
Right.
I need salvation that saves me from the hell I'm in now, not that salvation that saves me from the hell I'm in the afterlife.
Yep.
And once that kind of changed my whole understanding of what salvation is. And now I look back on that church I grew up with and I'm like, you guys aren't saved. Like, you guys are as lost as anybody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, I also don't really take the idea of hell that seriously, at least not the way I did. The whole point of the church that I was going to was what happens after you die.
Right.
You don't want to go to hell. You want to go to heaven. But it's like, no, you're already in hell. And there's a lot of people that are already in hell. Let's figure out how to get out of hell now.
Yep. I think that's something we've come back to over and over throughout the years of the podcast is like, what about what we're all on right now in this life? Like, can we talk about that a little bit, regardless of what you believe? We're all sharing this earth, and can we try to make some heaven on this earth?
And if you're, struggling with being a jerk, or you have these personality issues that make you miserable and you can't get along with the people around you, and like, the church is divided, and that even among Christians, everybody's arguing and not getting along. Why would it be any better in heaven?
Right.
Like, you're still the same person.
Yeah.
Right.
You're an asshole down here. You're probably going to be an asshole in heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that speaks.
There's so many Christians I've met that I would not want to spend eternity with.
Yeah, man. Like,
Seriously.
That speaks to a theme of Craig's brother's work that's come up again and again, which is the sort of like, you think you're building a wall to keep people out, but you're cornering yourself off into this little walled off world where all you have is other assholes. And like this idea of trying to keep people out because you're holier than them or best is always a way to only box yourself in further and further, and how anti-gospel that is. But I feel like that's something that's basically on every Craig's Brother record, some version of that idea.
Well, and there's a fear of change, right? It's like, I guess it's what dogma is.
Right.
Is like I'm afraid to let anything influence me that might change my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the exact opposite of repentance,
Mm-hmm.
which literally means to change your direction,
Mm-hmm.
to stop going in the direction you're going and going another direction. So, the central theme of Jesus's teaching, and most Christians are like, no.
Right.
I'm going to go grab another beer.
Yeah.
Go
for it.
What you got there?
Looks like a
Yeah.
Lagunitas.
I'm drinking Lagunitas.
Hell yeah.
Not as nothing really too adventurous.
Sure.
Hey man,
Hey, you guys-
need an old standby.
Are you guys drinking beer tonight?
Not tonight.
I had some earlier post work when I was a coworker
Nice.
had myself a Hams and a Coors Banquet.
That's the new drink. You should
Well-
tell them about the shitty beer bracket quick.
Me and my girlfriend and some of our friends, we decided that we wanted to have a blind shitty beer taste test, and so we did like a tournament style bracket where we did a blind taste test and paired shitty beers against each other.
That's
And-
amazing.
So we all had our own individual brackets to find out of the shitty 16 which beers which one would be our top beer. But the one beer that we unanimously all agreed on that lost in the first round, that everybody was like, this sucks, was Heineken.
Oh yeah, I hate Heineken.
Heineken is trash, and I can't believe people like. I'm like, we were all like, this is objectively not good, and there are other people that are like, well, I like Bud Light, no, the High Life is the best, or whatever's but everybody's like, no, Heineken's garbage.
So there wasn't any unanimous agreement on what was better, though.
Coors Banquet really cleaned up, right?
Coors Banquet did pretty well. I discovered that I like Coors products more than I like Budweiser and Miller. I was so surprised. I learned a lot about myself that night.
Well, you got to do it again with malt liquor.
Ooh, yeah. Some Mickeys.
Get some
Who's gonna
Mickeys.
win? Natty Ice or
Oh my
King Cobra?
It's been too long.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I hate myself that much. We did decide that like 16 was too many.
The limit? Yeah.
It was too many. So we're like, next time we do this, we're gonna like maybe start with 8.
Elite 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
there you
We're not going shitty again. We're going Minneapolis versus St. Paul breweries.
That could be
So-
good.
Have you ever talked beer with a Canadian?
No, we have some Canadian listeners, but I don't know if we've ever.
All right, Canadian listeners, you're not gonna like this. They're always like, "Oh, our beer is so much better, eh?" Sorry,
Nailed it.
and it's totally not like Molson and what other kinds they have. It's just all like it's
Labatt
not.
Blue.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
good. It's not good. Like maybe it's better than Coors or Bud Light, but no, it's not. It's not better. So that's all I have to say, Canadians. Take that.
Called out.
But keep liking Craig's Brother.
Yeah.
I still love you guys. I just don't like your beer.
Montreal, apparently the new capital for punk rock, right? That's where everybody's going for festivals and shows all the time.
Dude, our whole career, Quebec has been the best place we've ever
Yeah.
been. 1999
rules.
was the first time we went there, and it was like the first time we had real shows. It felt like
We got to get up there. We got to do a Montreal
Wow.
trip at some point. Isn't People of Punk Rock based in Quebec?
totally.
So
Yeah, we had more fans there than anywhere. We were touring with No Fun at All
mhm.
that year, and we showed up. We were like just arguing to get paid most of our gigs, and they had a road manager who was just kind of insane, and he kind of just he just took over for us. We'd show up at a show, and he'd be like, he was Australian. He'd be like, "Where's that fucking beer? Greg's brother needs beer." Like, he's like screaming. Poor Yannick, the guy who booked the whole tour. He's a great guy, but he was like his first tour he had ever booked, and he was like maybe 19 years old, and like Zoc was the guy's name, the Australian road manager. He's like, I'm gonna kick that little fucker's ass.
Amazing.
But it was so great to have somebody like actually standing up for us. Like up until then, like we'd just been treated like garbage everywhere.
Speaking of playing out and playing live, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask, are there Craig's Bro shows on the horizon here? Or is this, what are you guys thinking?
Well, we're playing Red Bridge Fest 2023.
Yep.
That's the only thing we've committed to.
Okay.
It's tough because Steven's in Germany.
Yeah.
And he's, has a family that he's trying to provide for.
Boo. Punk rock shows.
So flying out to, the United States isn't necessarily the greatest thing for him.
Sure.
I'm trying to figure out a local drummer. I've been talking a lot with Adam and the guys from Too Bad Eugene about basically just borrowing everyone but the drummer.
Yes.
Which would be sick.
Yes. We had Jason Reagan on, our dude.
Yeah.
And we talked about, let's just do a couple shows. He plays in both bands the whole time. Maybe you guys all play in both bands, and we got a Chicago show ready to go for you guys that we can help promote or whatever. So we would love to see something happen. We really want to see you guys live again.
Get a Craig's Brother and a Much the Same show
shit. Yeah.
together.
Dude, we were supposed to play with Much the Same in 2022.
I'm wearing my Much the Same shirt right now.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be sick. Craig's Brother and Much the Same. Wait, Much the Same's from Chicago, huh?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I heard you mention Winning Streak, which is our dude Chris McGrath's other band.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's in Chicago. He's been on the pod a couple times.
I love Winning Streak.
Yes, some version of Too Bad Eugene, Craig's Brother, Much the Same, Winning Streak live. I mean, yeah, we would really, really love to see that happen. So anyway,
just be 2 hours. The pit wouldn't stop.
Hell yeah.
Just keep going. Just one giant circle pit.
One question I kind of had with for playing the songs off of this record, there are things about the sound here that you haven't had before, such as throat singing, elements that we've
I'm glad you picked up on that.
Yeah, they're rules. Love a Craig's Brother album culminating in throat singing, not what I expected. But yeah, I feel like there's some lush and sort of elaborate production that hasn't always been on display for you guys. And is that, again, sort of how did that come about? Was that something that you intentionally wanted to do? Is it something you're aware of, playing some of these songs live that would have to be a little different? Or what were you sort of thinking with some of the new musical approaches here?
I mean, in terms of playing it live, I wasn't even thinking about it.
Sure.
I mean, honestly, if we were to play live, we'd probably play maybe 4 songs off the new record.
Sure.
Mostly we'd play Homecoming and Lost at Sea.
Sure.
Because that's what everybody wants to hear. That's the nice thing. Once you have a few records under your belt, you're only adding a couple more songs off the new material into your set. You're not just playing. I mean, maybe you would if you were, or maybe we would if we were full on touring band and we were promoting our new record.
Right.
But at this point, the people who want to hear us want to hear Homecoming mostly.
Sure. Andrew and I can send you the set lists we created for our deal Craig's Brother show if you want to see that.
Let's see. Let's see what I have. I had the 10 I have. This was done last year, so this is before any of the other Insult to Injury, Freedom, Follow Your Heart, Prince of America, Who Am I, Homecoming, 1,000-Yard Stare, Maintaining Destiny, Fallen, and Dear Charlotte.
Pretty good.
That's pretty. Yeah, those are all doable. I feel most of those are in our set anyway.
I had Follow Your Heart as the closer because I feel like that's the big emotional climax. You send people out. I don't know. I could see it either way, but
Follow Your Heart's easy. That one's easy to pull live.
Yeah.
I don't know. The end part of what did we call that song?
Ghost.
Yeah. We were calling it with names. Titles are the last thing we come up with.
Sure.
Usually we call it something like we were just calling it My Imagination for a long time. That's still what I think of it as. But yeah, Ghost. I wasn't really thinking about how we were going to pull that live. We'd have to have triggers to really pull it all. or it's not going to be as big as it is on the record. But
Right.
I'm trying to think what else. There's a lot of keyboard stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is.
So like,
Love that
if we
synthy.
if we
synthy
play
stuff
in
going on.
Europe, Tim will definitely play with us, or he's agreed to play with us. Tim Van Doorn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did you get hooked up with him?
Steven hooked it up somehow. Steven's got this like amazing talent for just being able to like just walk up to anyone and talk to them. He doesn't always know what to say, but he has no fear.
Uh-huh.
But I think originally we heard him from this record Saint Plaster. If you haven't heard that one, check it out. It's so great. Like every song is so good. It's kind of a similar deal. Like I think it was two guys that just sat down, Tim and another guy sat down and did that. But everything I've heard from Tim Van Doorn is amazing. I'm so glad we found him. He's like the perfect third member.
Yeah. Seems like he was very heavily involved on instruments and stuff too.
Yeah, he did. He did some guitar. He redid a lot of the bass, which is good. I mean, Steven's good, but he's not really thinking like a bass player. He's thinking like a guitar player. Most of the bass lines that he put down are just root notes.
Sure.
So Tim kind of did a lot of rethinking of the bass, and there were a few guitar parts that he put down, and all that keyboard stuff. And actually, a few guitar parts. The song, the intro track, "The Putrefaction of Trust." There's a super shredding solo at the end.
Yeah, there is.
That's Tim.
Okay.
Yeah, like how are we going to pull that live? I don't know, but I think if anybody could do it, it's Sam from Too Bad Eugene.
Yeah. Was there ever lyrics for that song, or did you always plan it as an instrumental?
We planned it as an instrumental, or
Okay.
Steven planned it as an instrumental, is what I should say. I didn't actually do anything on that song.
Sure. Yeah, it seems like musically it's pretty split for you guys here. I know you wrote almost all the lyrics, but how did you approach that? Were you just coming in with songs and deciding together which ones would go, or how did that work?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't know if we were like trying to be kind of fairly even about it. I mean, I guess we sat down with the goal of having 20 songs, and it was just kind of like, well, here's what I got, here's what I got. We just picked them and went with it.
So how did the throat singers happen? What was that like? Who's doing that? Is that you? That rules. Awesome. Well, you answered that.
So here's the story behind that. It's actually an interesting story. My uncle, I'm gonna have to have him listen to this podcast now. My uncle, he's a singer. He likes to sing in choirs and stuff. But he and some friends started studying and reproducing Sardinian throat singing. So Sardinia, an island in the Mediterranean, kind of off of Italy, but not really Italy. And there were a few videos that were made and were posted online of them singing. And these people in Sardinia saw it, and they're like, "That's great, come to Sardinia." So then he ended up making a documentary where they go to Sardinia and sing with all these throat singers. But
cool.
I first heard it from him probably 12 years ago, and then I kind of just learned it after. I was so impressed. I sat down and figured it out. And I've been intending on using it in a song for a while, just because it's kind of like a cool new sound that I'm not aware of anybody else doing. I'm sure there's somebody else doing it, but
no, it rules. I was so pumped when that came in the first time. It's such a good culminating endpoint for the song and for the record.
There's been so many times where I had an idea and then like somebody else had the idea first. Like I wanted to do French horn.
Ooh.
And then No Effects did it. What's the song? I think it's on Wolves and Wolves Clothing, or is it on Heavy Petting Zoo?
Sounds familiar.
Like Stole the World or Stop the World or
right.
something.
Yeah.
I can hear it. Anyway, the French horn is awesome. And I was like, I wanted to do that. So the throat singing, I'm like, well, I can't think of anybody who's done it, so I'm going to do it before somebody else does.
And then that asshole Weird Al went and like made a movie, fake biopic. Who does he think he is?
You know what though? After watching his movie, I'm like, that's cool, but I'm still pretty stoked on the true story of Craig's brother.
Yeah,
it's got a whole nother thing that movie doesn't have. I mean, maybe it's just a bunch of inside jokes that only I get, but
yes. For those who don't know, there is a screenplay draft out there of the Craig's brother biopic. And Ted, you were saying when you saw the Weird Al trailer, you were like, this guy stole my idea.
Yeah. So just so you listeners know, I wrote a screenplay, The True Story of Craig's Brother. There's very little that's true about it. Basically, it was after I saw the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, the Queen movie. I was like, this movie is just every other band movie. Like, they really did not do any research on Queen. I haven't learned anything about Queen. I still liked it because Queen is Queen, but like in terms of the actual writing, I'm like, this is just every other band movie. I was like, what if somebody made a movie like that about Craig's brother? And then that just inspired, it just rolled from there, and I had to write it out. So The True Story of Craig's Brother, my friends, my listening friends, you don't get to read it, but maybe one day you'll get to see it.
Yes.
This has to happen. This needs to happen.
There are parts of it that I was telling John before you joined that I'm like, this like has so many sight gags. It's like, it feels like a Leslie Nielsen script.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, because like I can envision like sort of like some of the smash cuts that you're talking about, and like or at least it's just sort of how I'm envisioning it, and I'm like that. Yeah, I really want to see this thing happen. There's
definitely like a Naked Gun or like Airplane level of humor.
Yeah.
On it, or Mel Brooks or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we were saying before we started the pod that we need to make this thing happen. Is this the next Kickstarter Craig's Brother project? But we got to see this thing crowdfunded and made into reality because it's so good. All right. Well, we have our precious few minutes with you remaining.
Oh yeah, it's 10 o'clock. Dang.
Yeah, wanted to do maybe just quick lightning round style of a few questions to get in here before you go. Actually, before we even get to that, when you were talking about like by the number biopics of bands, have you seen Walk Hard, the movie?
Wait.
It's like John C. Reilly sort of making fun of like Johnny Cash and Ray Charles biopics.
I don't think I saw it, but I remember it. Yeah.
Okay. I highly recommend you watching it. I think you would really enjoy it. It includes this one detail that I bring up on the podcast all the time, is just like the height of like production wildness, where he's sort of doing his Brian Wilson phase, and he's like, it's not done yet, I need an army of didgeridoos, 10,000 didgeridoos. So anyway, I think you'd appreciate that movie. But just a few quick questions. So we were Andrew and I were talking about this off pod of like some of the lyrics we were pouring over on the new record. One in particular I wondered about your insight on, which is superhero. So listening to like the first verse, we're like, okay, maybe this is about Jesus. And then you get to like cuter than shit and like talking about finding your keys. I'm just like, so who exactly is the superhero? Like, are you willing to reveal that?
Yeah, that's Laura. That's my wife.
Okay. I wondered. And that's awesome. You want to, so it's like a love song.
Yeah, it's a love song. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
That rules. I mean, we hear her taking care of your kids in the background now, so she sounds like a superhero.
She is a superhero, and she managed to Rube Goldberg the microphone.
Well done. That song rules. And we were like, it's clearly just like, okay, so there's things about her that are Jesus-like, which is great. But we were like, this is maybe a song about Jesus, but then not quite.
What's the line? Like, healing the sick, saving the poor, finding
my keys. Yeah, that rules. That was my first insight into like, oh, there's this isn't quite Jesus. We're having some fun here. A great couplet.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, do you have questions about this record that you want to get to quick?
What have you been listening to lately?
It's on my list too.
Yeah.
Most recently, I've been listening to everything that people are comparing the new record to.
Interesting.
So today I listened to Sick Waiting.
Don't know that.
They're really good. I think that's what they're called. And then I listened to this band, Charlie Bit My Finger.
Okay.
We're also pretty good. The lyrics were a little bit silly in my opinion, but I don't know. I was listening to Cigar. I'm trying to think. Mostly just stuff that people are comparing us to right now.
Sure.
At least in terms of new things. What's
some of your favorite stuff that you've done? Do you have like an album or a song or like a time period of the band that you're particularly proud of?
Like, honestly, I'm so close to the new material that it's hard for me to like be 100% sure that it's good. It'll probably take me a couple of years, but like Insidious Live is so underrated, and so many people just haven't even heard it.
Yeah. True.
And I love that record, and I'm so proud of it. Like every single song. So that's the one, I guess, lately, mostly just because I feel like it never got the attention it deserved.
Feels like a lost Craig's Brother record.
Yeah. Yeah. And it'd be one thing, like, I don't know if it was mediocre or something, but
it absolutely rules.
Plus it has Klamath Falls on it, which I love that song a lot.
That record rules. I think it took us by surprise a little bit when we got there, because we hadn't really heard, like you're saying, that much talk about it. And I was really blown away by it. Like I really resonate with that record a lot.
I've been thinking about, and I need to get the rest of the guys who made that record to agree, but I've been thinking about seeing if People with Punk Rock wants to re-release it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, dude. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons that, it caught us both off guard is, coming from, listening to Lost at Sea, and how the opening track, to Lost at Sea is just like this slow burn, and then like Freedom opens and just like explodes, and you're just like, okay, we're back on this like fast intensity
skate punk.
I was just like, oh my god, the riffage on that song too, man.
Kyle Black is a really good producer. I don't know if you heard the new Wilhelm Scream. Oh, check it out
a little bit. I gotta check it out more.
It's a new album.
Yeah, Kyle Black did their newest album.
Okay.
Crazy good. So that was huge. We were also working with Andy again on that record, which was rad.
Pretty shreddy.
Brought back some of the shred and some of the homecoming feel.
Again, very like complex themes, a lot of what you're dealing with on that album. That was one of the things that you when you called in, you were sort of affirming us, saying like death hangs heavy over this record. There's some like heavy stuff, but it's like we said, not presented in this way that makes it super heavy and super obvious. But I think
totally. My grandmother had just died. Andy had just got divorced, or was in the process of getting divorced, which was a weird window in time. Like Andy's not an easy guy to find time to do stuff unless you're paying him to do like engineering or producing. But he had this time suddenly, and he actually, I think, really made that record happen. He kind of came to us and was like, let's make a record.
I agree. That record rules. Everybody should check it out if they don't know it.
And it should absolutely get a pressing.
Yes, please.
More Craig's Brother pressings in general is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, I especially am very much looking forward to getting my record from People of Punk Rock. The artwork direction for this new record is so interesting, and I guess that'd be another one of my final questions too, is like the art direction. The sort of, there's things are like very foggy, very hazy, kind of dark and mysterious. What kind of conversations were there around the art direction for the singles and the record, or did you just kind of find someone and cut them loose?
It was pretty much all Juan DeLonge, the main art guy for People with Punk Rock. At one point we were talking to, I want to say Mark Laverton, but that's not it. That was the president of Fuller, or former president of Fuller. It was Mark. At any rate, we were talking to one of these guys who did a bunch of the Fat Records covers back in the day. And he had this idea that actually I thought was kind of great, where it was like a golf tournament or something. And it was like a couple ladies in a golf tournament, each wearing a medal that said participant, which would have been like a kind of a cartoon, like that old Fat Record style. I thought that was pretty great, but he would have cost a lot more money. But then Juan came up with these ideas, and we were like, wow, that's actually really cool. But it was really all Juan. Like we didn't have any, like, we weren't like, let's do a foggy thing or something.
Sure.
Like, I was trying to come up with something that fit the like title, but I like the abstract too.
Yeah. The cover's really cool. Awesome. Well, is there anything that you wanted to make sure we touched on before we let you go?
I kind of wish we had talked more about the true story of Craig's Brother, but
Let's do it, man.
Maybe after it comes out, we could do a whole true story of Craig's brother podcast.
Ooh, absolutely.
I mean,
Yes.
I just didn't know how much you wanted to reveal. I thought it was supposed to be a little secret.
It is a little secret, but the secret's better if there's like some people who are in on the secret,
Okay.
Well,
make everybody else want to be in on the secret.
okay. Well, I'll ask this question then, and to tantalize. Will you do your own nude scenes?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Just got a little
I just flashed my man boobs right now for you podcast listeners.
Hell yes.
It's gonna be the director's cut.
That's
I
just
mean,
for the Patreon.
I was kind of thinking like The Rock would play me.
Sure.
Sure.
Naturally.
He gives off a Ted vibe, I feel like.
Are there nude scenes?
Well, I was thinking like the scene, where you're on squatting down on the desk. I'm like, I don't know if that would be.
Oh yeah, the pooping scene. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you get a little butt action, little side butt. What
I would do that. Assuming I'm gonna play myself. Maybe somebody else should play me. I don't know, but if I had to, I would definitely poop on a desk.
You heard it here first, folks. Yeah,
that'll be a pull quote in a review.
Yeah,
about the new album. I would definitely poop on a desk. Ted Bond.
I mean, I think we've achieved what I wanted. Like, just imagine how tantalized people are now. They really want to do this movie.
Yeah, this is the kind of tease that'll get people to fund this thing. Is the promise of the pooping scene.
Ted poops on a desk. I have to see.
Say no more.
Yes,
this is some Oscar bait right here.
It is truly wonderful hearing about this questionable history of the band and how it came to be. And I mean, I feel like of the parts of the script that are fabricated, the one true part is that you got your first guitar from Jesus. I mean, Yeah.
I think that's
who was on the run at the time.
and the like the notes of the script saying that like Jesus gets the shit beaten out of him
by the cops.
By the cops.
Pretty perfect.
Yeah.
No explanation. Just
I got to see this thing. This has to happen. We're invested now.
Yeah.
I mean, I just assume that if Jesus showed up, the first time they crucified him, these days it would be cops beating the shit out of him.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then kneeling on him until he died. Yeah.
Turning off their body cameras,
Not great. But
No.
I'm glad that he gave you that guitar.
Yeah.
Yes. Scenes like that and many others to be found in this movie that's to come that Magpod will back its producing support behind it.
I think one of my favorite scenes is the Spinal Tap reference, the British accent.
Yeah.
They
So
stole our rain. Those bloody wankers stole our rain.
So good, man. You're talking about not taking yourself too seriously on this record, and I feel like a parody biopic is exactly what is the missing piece of the Craig's brother picture right now. It needs to happen.
Yeah.
What I think is great is that we're not like a funny band. At least our music isn't funny.
Sure.
I don't think we have hardly any lyrics that are funny.
You do talk about poo on the new record a little bit, but
I know, right? But I'm saying it totally seriously.
yeah, right.
Which is funny because, like, I think part of the reason that song took so long to come out was like everybody's like, poo, like, come on, dude. And then somehow in 2022, it's like, yeah, poo, of course. Let's talk about poo. Like, that's the way the world.
Is the opening track is the poo song, or
Got the poo scene, the poo song,
got the poo scene, the poo song,
the poutine if you're going up to Montreal.
That's
Oh,
true.
man.
I don't know. I don't know.
Keep your poo scene out of my poo team, okay?
That's what I always say. Well, what better way to end a meaningful conversation than with the poo scene and the poutine? Ted, man, we are huge fans of you. We're huge fans of your music. Very psyched to finally talk to you, and would love to talk to you again sometime. Would love to help set up any kind of Midwest show we can get going, help out with the movie. But yeah, we're very, very psyched about this new record. So
Yeah.
people need to go pick up Easily One, Rarely Deserved. It is out now. Anything else you want to direct folks to?
No, but thanks a lot, you guys, for having me on. I'm glad we finally did it.
Absolutely. And hopefully we can do an in-person hang one of these days.
Yeah, we have to.
Let's go up to Montreal. Let's do it there.
Yes.
That sounds great.
You guys should come to Redbridge.
Let's do it.
It's
That
insane.
sounds great.
And, well, I don't know. I've never been there, but apparently it's insane.
I would like to go there. Let's do it.
Where is it?
It's in Quebec City, or I think right outside of Quebec City. But Quebec
Cool.
City is awesome.
Shit, I need to get my passport renewed.
Oh, yeah, I just did that recently. Yes, let's make that happen. See you in Canada. Ted, thank you so much for this, man. Appreciate it.
Of course, you guys. Have a good evening.
You too.
As if out of some cavity, but all I see is poo. Your excuses are new, but so is your
No poo to be seen in that interview, though.
No, but thank you to Ted Bond for talking poo and lots of other stuff with us. What a great dude.
Mostly we talked poo, I think.
Yeah, that was the main sort of takeaway, I feel like. Poo. Anyway, great dude.
Great dude.
Go buy this record. Pressure them into playing some shows so that we could see them perform live. Let's get this movie funded, etc. Let us know what you think about this conversation with Ted at Magnified Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Follow and subscribe to the pod if you haven't already, and give us a rating or a review. We will read your review on the show.
Review.
Email us. I'm trying to find a way to put the EU in there, and I can't. Email us at magnifiedpod@gmail.com.
You can leave us a voicemail,
872
4763872 MagPod.
Support us on the Patreon, patreon.com/magnifiedpod. Pick up some.
I think I fucked up that entire phone number. 8727 MagPod.
Sorry, I stepped on it with my important joke. You can pick up
We're
some
not
new.
trying to make fun of you, Ted.
No, we're
I feel
not.
like I feel like this is coming off like we're making fun of him.
Yeah, just immediately launching into shitting on him. You know we do it out of love.
I think you mean poo.
Peeing on him. Can't emphasize enough how much I respect this man and his music. Truly. And you can tell that by the
How much
great
you
way
filleted him.
Yeah, sorry. Sometimes I was telling you to do this off mic that I'm like, sometimes I feel like I'm like, you're so great to our guests, but I couldn't help myself with this one. Anyway, what's also great is that season 4 merch you can pick up at magnifiedpod.storyenvy.com. Thanks to Small Step Records for sponsoring us. Go to smallsteprecords.com to learn more. And thanks to shadow producer Jason and Bruno at Unoriginal Vinyl for our artwork. Well, I think I hear the voice of the spirit begging us to shut the fuck up. We'll be back to try to make you go astray in 2 weeks' time, because this week is Thanksgiving as you folks are listening to this. So we'll be off next week as we're recording this. But in 2 weeks' time, we'll be back to properly discuss Craig's Brothers' Easily Won, Rarely Deserved. Ooh, yeah.
Now that you're bold enough to come out of your hole, I guess you think the things you say are meaningful. But make no mistake, there's no going back to the dark. You've shown your face now, everyone knows who you are. Now that you're out of your hole, now that you think you have power, without your sheets and hoods, we finally meet the coward. Now that you finally showed your face, now we can see your master race. Illiterate and toothless, going bald and overweight. Now that you're brave enough to come out of your
Good shit.
Yeah. Fuck you, racist.
Yeah. Thought it was Magnified Pod with the opening organ notes there for a second.
That's true.
For more shows like this one, visit rockcandyrecordings.com.